Let's talk about some of the invalidating environments that our clients come up with. The overexpected child. The overexpected child is the one who expectations are set higher than what he or she can actually attain. They want the best, they want them to succeed, but they always set the bar a little too high, right? And it's for your own good. And I'm going to do that because if I don't set it high, you're not going to achieve it, and I need to give you something to stretch for, and you need to work towards something. And it's all coming from really the best place in a way, and yet the result of it is not good. It can create an ongoing pattern of invalidation. I list this one first as a childhood of invalidation because this is the one that I can tell you from experience that the light bulb really comes on with a lot of folks in treatment. It does. And they get it when they see this because it's like, wow, that's what it is. I came from a loving home and yet I'm suffering with these issues. It makes sense. It's just I could never quite be good enough. I was never as good as my sister or my brother who was always making accomplishments, making the honor roll, you name it. And sometimes it's not even generated by the parents. Sometimes it's generated within us. We simply compare ourselves with what's happening in the family, and we find ourselves constantly short. And so the expectation that we hold is that we do better, and we can never do better, and so therefore we grow up in an invalidating environment. That really, every invalidating environment plants the seed that there's something about me that is broken, that is unlovable. There is something about me that I can't trust. The overlooked child. Again, those who may have grown up in a home where there's been addiction, an alcoholic family, you know this really well. Sometimes there's just no one there. They're there, but they're not there. Mom and dad are working 2 or 3 jobs. Mom and dad are off drinking. Mom and dad are out dating at night. They're not there. And so the overlooked child becomes invalidated because there's no one there to reflect back that feeling. Remember, the social creature with shame, born to fit in, born needing that reflection, needing someone there to say what you feel is okay, wanting someone to validate, and it not being there. They will eventually get it somehow, but it's not coming from the family system. And it really begins to question as they get hit with that naturally occurring shame over and over and over again with no defense against it. There's something about me that's incredibly flawed. The rejected child. This is the one that you'll never make it. You can't be good enough. We know this scenario. It happens in families where, particularly I see it in blended families a lot. I don't know about you guys, but there's one kid that's made to be the scapegoat in essence, and you're always the bad one. And if it weren't for your brother, we would be okay. We'd all be fine. But it does happen, and that can be, I think that's pretty clear to all of us that that's an invalidating environment. The sexually shamed child. I couldn't think of a better picture than Pee Wee Herman. This really does relate back to the content in the Velvet Rage about gay and lesbian children, but it goes across the board, which is kids are very sexual, as we know. I mean, that was certainly one of the things that Freud began to highlight, and that all of us know that really as kids are growing up and they're developing sexually, they are very sexual. And the idea, and it's a very powerful thing that really comes to consume their minds and their world and their outlook and their feelings. And yet they look around in the world and nobody's talking about it. And you're not supposed to talk about it, and I don't know what to do with this. And it becomes very invalidating for them because they have these experiences and there's no one there to confirm that it's okay. And also, aside, just to model that it's okay to have the feelings and you don't have to act on it, but you can sit with the feelings and be okay with it. The religiously shamed child. This is one I always get into trouble with, so you guys just have to give me a little license here because I know I probably will offend someone in the room with this one, I know. So, just understand where I came from, which was growing up in a very restrictive Pentecostal family. And one of the things that I talk about here is that a religion that says there is something about me that is flawed becomes really invalidating when that is the predominant philosophy in the household and in the family. And many of you, I don't know if any of you have really studied theology or if that's been of interest of you, but if you ever look at it, it's curious to me that almost every denomination, brand, it doesn't matter what you look at, there's usually two versions of it. One is that there is something, original sin kind of idea, there's something that's really broken about you, and you can't trust yourself, and you can't trust your feelings, and you need to change it. And then there's usually another version that goes under the same label, which is that somehow God or the divine resides within you, and we need to cultivate that and allow it to flourish. What I would offer to you to consider is that the latter is much more validating, because the former can be incredibly invalidating. It teaches children, it teaches us that what we think and feel can't be trusted. And if you can't trust what's inside you, who are you? And how does the self really develop out of that? If you can't trust the very basic urges that you have and accept them, and you need someone else to tell you who you are, you get on that treadmill of needing outside validation always, and someone else to set your values, someone else to set your morals, and someone else to set your spirituality, and someone else to define your life. So just I'd offer for you to think about it, because it certainly was my experience to grow up in this, and I know I've seen a lot of adults, and many of you too have seen adults that have come in for treatment, that this is a significant issue for them. Yes, definitely. And then the controlled child. I don't know about you guys. I don't know if you can see it, it's a leash on. I hate those things. I want to tell you a story. I had a really wonderful young man who came to see me years ago. And just so you know, in any of my stories that I tell you, I usually change a little bit of the details, both in the books and when I tell them, so that you don't identify who it is. But this is a wonderful young man who had grown up in Houston, Texas, was the son of a concert pianist, the mother, who really was so overridden by anxiety that she couldn't perform, so she had gone into teaching in a conservatory and would travel the country sometimes teaching in various conservatories, but could never play publicly and was never able to get her anxiety really under control, but was very, what we would consider OCD. The house, everything had to be perfect. The home, as it was described, was the living room was wood floor, white walls, and a black Steinway. And that was it. Very cool, but everything had to be in order. And the father was an architect, and actually a fairly successful architect who had worked with a well-known architect in Europe and had done some important things, also a little bit on the OCD side. I gather from this client, I never met the parents, as you'll see why later, but I gathered from the clients that they actually were very loving and cared very much for this kid, and he was very bright, as clearly they were too. I mean, they were a very successful and creative family. But everything that this kid had done from the time he had any memory until he grew up had been determined by the parents. In fact, the clothes had been laid out in the morning of what he would wear, everything that he would eat would be prepared. He ultimately became a cellist, and a very good cellist, but it was because the mom had selected the teachers and the instruments and the camps and ultimately everywhere that he had played. He never made decisions about his life. It was all from the parents. And this really, it had happened at such a young age, and it was so pervasive that many of us would think, oh my God, there's going to be a huge rebellion. He's not going to be able to handle that. Well, there really wasn't. He never even got to that place of strength inside himself in life. Everything had been so determined for him from the beginning that when he came in to see me, his parents had both tragically passed away, not of the same thing, but within about 6 months period, both had died. And this young man had literally no direction in life, could not make a decision about anything. I remember one of our early therapy sessions was about what package to sign up for on cable television. Now, you know, this is where he came in, this is what was on his, this is what he was struggling with, but it just shows you the level at which he could not determine his own life. It had been so determined for him. Very bright, very capable in all other ways, but didn't have an ounce of self-validation to be able to make a decision and determine it and look within himself and say, that's okay. And then when he would make a decision, he would be tormented with the second guessing. And some of you know, you've worked with it, maybe some of us have struggled with it too. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this, and then the rest of the time is, well, maybe I should have, or should I have done this, or would this option have been better, or maybe this would have been cheaper, or on and on and on it goes, out of the inability to self-validate. But oftentimes that comes out of the child that really is never allowed to develop mastery on their own, that everything is being controlled and determined, and as a result that can be very invalidating. Chronic exposure to an invalidating environment is inherently traumatizing because it obstructs the ability to self-validate. All right, let's take a look at how self-validate develops, and I've got just a little simple analogy. I hope it helps you. But if you think about validations from others as being the root, this is when we're growing up and when we're needing to find a defense against shame, and we reach out to others to validate us. Mommy, is this okay? Does this look good? Do you like it? Can I get in the club? Can I sit at the cool table? All of those things happening. Reaching outside, validation from others. It's the root that in time, with healthy development, grows into the adult that learns to self-validate. So it's okay because I want to do it. It's okay because this is me. This is my feelings. These are my ideas. These are my thoughts. And that's enough to say it's okay. When you think about things like passion and joy, and you think about creativity, it all comes out of that crucible of being able to self-validate. The ability to strike out into the unknown by myself, forge a path, and say, it's okay. Because I want to do it. Because I thought of it. And stick with it. Very few of us really develop fully with that sense of self-validation intact. Many of us through our work, whether through school or through our own therapy or through our own life, have learned to develop that and really strengthen it and reinforce it over time. But I find that very few of us really develop that to the extent at which we need to live a healthy life without having done some extra work. The invalidating environment, when we grow up in the invalidating environment and that there's no one there to reflect back to us, we never begin to bring it internal. So as a result, this larger, more flourishing self never happens. We don't have the ability to self-validate. And so we continually get stuck on this treadmill of seeking it from others. It's almost like an addiction. It's like, I need to get you to approve of me, and that satisfies me for a while, and then I start to fall back, and it's not good, and I need more, and I need more, and I need more. And I don't think, there are a lot of places, I live now in Los Angeles, I think in Los Angeles and New York we see that a lot. It's like, you know, how much is enough? How many awards, how much money, how much success, how big do you have to get before it feels validating? And when you see them, and many of you know, when you've seen folks like this in therapy, it's interesting, it's not enough.